In a frozen colonial settlement ruled by fear and superstition, a young orphan named Mary Willard is driven into the wilderness after seeking shelter with the village's outcast healer. As winter deepens and strange forces stir beneath the land, Mary finds herself caught between the faith that condemned her family and an ancient power the forest refuses to forget. The winter of 1625 came like a curse upon New Dedham, a colonial outpost buried beneath endless snow. Smoke from a dozen chimneys clung low over the cabins, refusing to rise, as if even the sky had frozen. Hunger hollowed the people, and fear gnawed their faith. Mary Willard, a pale, quiet orphan of 16, drifted between doorways and mercy, surviving on the pity of neighbors who pitied too little. Her mother had been hanged years before, accused of witchcraft when a fever took half the village. Mary had watched her swing beneath the gallows tree, her face gone, still against the winter wind. Since then, she had despised all talk of magic. When the fever returned, carried by frost and famine, Mary found no hearth left open to her. The villagers muttered that blood breeds its likeness. With nowhere to go, she followed the narrow track through the woods to the cottage of Widow Ashcroft, the settlement's outcast and healer. Smoke curled from the widow's chimney like a single thread of defiance against the storm. The woman herself was thin and sharp-eyed, her grey hair braided with dried sprigs of lavender. "You will find no charity here," she said at first, though her hands were gentle as she drew Mary inside. "But if you can work, you may eat." Mary learned to work quickly. She gathered roots buried in snow, crushed herbs into salves, and listened as the widow spoke of the unseen forces that tied all things together. "The world forgets its roots, child," she said often, "but the earth remembers." At first, Mary recoiled at the charms hanging from the rafters, woven symbols of twine and ash. But the widow taught her patience. She learned that fire could be coaxed without harm, that certain herbs could ease fevers when prayers could not. She began to feel for the first time that her hands might heal more than they destroyed. But the villagers watched the smoke curling from the forest cottage and whispered. When the crops failed and the livestock perished, those whispers grew louder. Strange lights flickered among the trees at night. Children woke screaming of voices calling their names. And one morning, a hunter found symbols scorched into the snow near the widow's door. "They've brought the devil upon us," cried the reverend. Before dawn, the mob gathered, faces wrapped in scarves, voices raw with fear. They stormed the cottage, seized Widow Ashcroft, and dragged her to the square. Mary fought through the crowd, pleading that her mother had died for the same lie, but no one listened. The widow met her eyes and smiled through the ropes. "Run, child," she said softly. "The forest knows your name." When the torches rose, Mary turned and fled. The shouts faded behind her, swallowed by the storm. Snow closed around her boots, erasing every trace of her path. As dawn broke, a red glow lingered over New Dedham, the light of another pyre burning against the snow. Deep in the woods, Mary fell to her knees before the frozen earth and whispered into the silence, "If the forest remembers, then let it remember me." And somewhere beyond the trees, something ancient seemed to stir. Mary stumbled through the wilderness, her breath tearing in ragged clouds that froze before her face. The forest rose in all directions, black trunks and white snow, endless and cruel. Every step was a battle against a cold clawing at her chest. Grief and frost blurred together until she could not tell which hurt more. The world had burned behind her, and all she carried was the echo of Widow Ashcroft's last words, "Run, child, the forest knows your name." She did not know how long she walked before she fell. The snow cushioned her collapse like a grave prepared in silence. Her thoughts drifted between prayer and blasphemy, between the God the villagers swore by and the earth the widow spoke of. "I will not speak to shadows. I will not beg the trees." Yet even as she swore it, she heard it, the faint, rhythmic whispering of branches above, the sigh of something vast exhaling through the woods. When she awoke, the snow had ceased. She lay in a clearing encircled by towering oaks so old their roots burst from the ground like the backs of sleeping beasts. The trees formed a perfect ring, and carved into their bark were spiraling runes, faintly glowing beneath a skin of frost. The air pulsed with a quick heartbeat. Mary reached out. The moment her fingers brushed one of the runes, warmth surged through her hand, alive, defiant, as if the tree remembered her. She gasped and stumbled back as the air shimmered, bending like heat over a fire. Figures stepped forth from the haze, women draped in pale mist, their faces shifting between beauty and sorrow. Their eyes glow faintly, not with menace, but remembrance. From among them emerged Widow Ashcroft. Her gray hair shone silver, her back straight, her voice smooth as flowing water. "You cannot run from what you are, child," she said, smiling as though the noose had never touched her throat. Mary fell to her knees. "I'm no witch. My mother was hanged for lies. I want no part of this." The spirit's expression softened. "Your mother was no witch, only a healer, like all who once knelt within this hollow circle. We bound the old powers to harmony, but when men raised their church upon the stones, the covenant broke. The Leyline beneath New Dedham, its pulse of life, was torn open. Now something ancient stirs within it. The air thickened and images unfurled within it, roots splitting the ground, rivers freezing mid-flow, and a colossal figure of frost rising beneath the soil. The Winter Queen, whispered Ashcroft. She was bound when this land was young, queen of stillness, hunger, and sleep. The circle held her, but the chains are cracking. She will wake, and she will claim what warmth remains. The spirit reached forward, pressing a talisman into Mary's palm, woven oak and bone, still warm as living flesh. You carry the last spark. Choose whether to guard it, or let the cold devour all. The vision dissolved, snow fell again, silent and slow. Mary stood alone in the clearing, the talisman glowing faintly in her hand. From the forest edge came a whisper, not in condemnation, but in warning. Her mother's voice. The past could not be undone, but perhaps the curse could, and the forest waited for her answer. Mary built her shelter by the river's edge, where the trees bent low as if to shield her from the wind. The river ran sluggish beneath a crust of ice, its whispering current, a voice she had come to trust more than her own thoughts. Days bled into nights, each the same pale shade of survival. She scavenged roots, caught snow in a pot to melt, and watched her reflection in the gray water grow thinner, stranger, until she could scarcely recognize herself. The forest was her only companion now, and it was not silent. Sometimes, when the world stilled, she felt it, a deep, slow rhythm rising through the soles of her feet, the heartbeat of the earth itself, steady and patient beneath the frost. It reminded her of the widow's words, "The earth remembers." She pressed her hand to the soil and whispered, "Then remember mercy." At night, sleep brought no peace. The Winter Queen came in dreams, a woman sculpted from moonlight and ice, her crown shimmering like 1,000 knives, her eyes blacker than a new moon. "Come closer," the queen would murmur to the snowstorm that filled Mary's mind. "Let me in, and I shall end your pain." The promise was honeyed, the tone almost kind, but always another voice followed, a softer one, buried beneath the wind. "Stand firm, Mary," her mother's voice, unwavering. She awoke one dawn with frost spirals etched around her camp, glimmering faintly blue. The talisman on her chest pulsed in time with her heartbeat. When she held it, the fire sparked in the pit, without flint or tinder. When she touched the frozen ground, the snow receded in circles around her boots. And when she sang the lullabies her mother once whispered, the frost on the trees formed perfect symbols, spirals of protection, carved by no human hand. Days later, while hunting for bark to burn, she followed a trail through the pines and stumbled upon the ruins of an old stone buried under ice. Its surface bore the same ruins she had seen in the hollow circle. The stones glowed faintly, humming, but beneath the hum was something else, a voice like shifting glaciers, calling from below. Through fragments of dream and memory, she began to understand. The settlers' church, its foundation laid upon the circle's sacred stones, had cut through the ley line, pulsed beneath the colony. The river of life that had once nourished the land now leaked into the air, wild and hungry. The more the settlers burned and built, the more the Winter Queen's essence awoke, feeding on their fear, their prayers, their fires, their cruelty. All of it hastened their undoing. Mary sank to her knees, her breath misting in the air. "Who did this?" she whispered to the empty woods. "You damned yourselves." Her words vanished into the cold, but the ground beneath her trembled, as if in answer. That night, the first great blizzard came. The wind howled with 1,000 voices, tearing through the forest like judgment. Through the storm cloud she saw her, the Winter Queen's towering form etched in lightning and snow, her arms open wide as if to claim the world. The forest groaned and trees bowed under invisible weight. Mary clutched the talisman to her chest, her pulse matching the storm's fury. She had denied the craft her whole life. Now it was all that stood between life and ruin, and the snow kept whispering her name. When Mary emerged from the forest, dawn bled pale and colorless across the horizon. New Dedham lay in ruin. The church's steeple had collapsed under a shell of ice, and the bell hung twisted, frozen mid-peal. Smoke curled weakly from the broken chimneys. Those who had once shouted witch now cowered among the wreckage, clutching rosaries to lips too numb to pray. Their faith had shattered with their walls. Mary's boots crunched over the frost as she crossed the square. The few who recognized her flinched as though death itself walked in her shape. Her hair hung in tangled ribbons, her cloak rimmed with ice, and the talisman pulsed faintly beneath her collarbone, a heartbeat in defiance of the storm. She stepped through the ruined doors of the church. The air inside was colder than the wind outside. The altar had split down the center, revealing beneath its stones a faint blue glow, the wound in the earth where the Leyline bled through. "I can stop this," Mary said, her voice steady, though her body trembled. "But you must trust me." The reverend, gaunt and wild-eyed, staggered forward. "Trust you?" He raised a trembling hand toward her. "Witch, you brought this upon us." Before Mary could answer, the wind tore through the rafters with a cry that seemed to form her name. The sound pressed a breath from every chest. The reverend sank to his knees, his prayer dissolving into sobs. Mary looked upon them, these people who had killed her mother, burned her mentor, and banished her to the snow. Yet pity softened their fury. They were frightened children before forces they could not name. "Come," she said, "if you still wish to live, follow me." And they did. Through the white woods she led them, past the frozen fields to the hollow circle, where frost rose from the ground like smoke. At its center, the earth had cracked open, spilling a cold blue light into the sky. The air thrummed with power, beautiful and terrible. From the rift emerged the Winter Queen, her form half ice, half moonlight. Her crown glittered with daggers of frost. Her eyes were endless night. "You were the mark of the hollow circle," she said, her voice like a blizzard giving speech. "Bow, and you may live." Mary's heart thundered. The villagers cowered behind her, their breath frosting in terror. But Mary took one step forward. "I bow to no tyrant, man nor spirit." She drove the talisman into the snow. "I am the daughter of no witch," she declared, "yet I am one by choice." The Leyline ignited. Roots flared with light beneath the earth. Ghosts of the hollow circle rose around her, Ashcroft among them, forming a ring of fire within the frost. The queen shrieked, the ground trembling beneath her scream. Mary began to chant her mother's final prayer, twisting faith and earth into one. The talisman blazed and the queen's body cracked like glass. Eyes cascaded into the rift as the earth closed over her, sealing her beneath the roots once more. But power always demands a price. The glow did not fade. It sought a vessel. Mary pressed her palm to the ground and felt her warmth rush away like a tide. "Let my blood be the balance," she whispered, smiling through tears. "Let the world remember." As the strength ebbed, the forest's frost melted in a single breath of spring, and New Dedham, for the first time in years, began to thaw. When dawn finally broke, it was not with thunder or wind, but silence, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. The storm had vanished as if it had never been. Snow melt threaded through the ruins of New Dedham, sparkling like veins of silver under the newborn sun. The villagers emerged from their homes, blinking in disbelief. The church lay in ruins still, but the air had changed. For the first time in years, it carried warmth. They followed the melted path into the forest, searching for the girl who had faced the storm. The trees opened into the hollow circle, now calm and glistening with dew. At its heart stood a single oak tree, tall and proud, its bark etched with faintly glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Beneath it, the earth hummed softly, the Leyline, once wounded, now sleeping in peace. No body was found, only the talisman, half buried in the soil, fused with the roots. When the reverend touched the oak's bark, the runes shimmered beneath his hand, and he withdrew as if burned. None spoke aloud what they felt, but all knew Mary Willard had given her life to the land. Seasons passed and the settlement rebuilt itself, not with ambition, but humility. The new chapel stood smaller, its steeple plain and unadorned. The people no longer spoke the word witch with hatred, though fear still lingered at its edges. Mothers warned their children not to wander too deep into the woods. Yet some nights when the fog rolled low and the moon cast its pale light, they swore they saw a figure moving among the trees. She was young, they said, with hair like smoke and eyes like dawnlight. She carried herbs and charms woven with oak leaves and her hands glow faintly when she touched the wounded or the lost. Those who wandered from the road found her waiting, silent and kind. The sick awoke to warmth where frost had once claimed them, and those who had came to the woods with malice in their hearts never found their way out again. Mary Willard had not died. She had merely become what the world had always tried to deny her, a keeper of the balance, a voice between earth and sky. She walked the boundary between mercy and might, between faith and magic. Her power was not the dominion the settlers feared, but the harmony they had forgotten. Every winter when the first snow drifted down, Mary returned to the oak. There she could stand with her hand pressed against the runes, whispering into the cold morning air, "I will keep the light you left in me alive." The wind always answered, brushing her hair like a mother's touch. The forest carried her vow through every root and branch, reminding the sleeping world that magic, when guided by mercy, could be grace itself. Far beneath the earth, in chambers of ice older than time, the Winter Queen stirred once more. Yet her slumber was calm, lulled by the steady heartbeat of the Leyline, and the love of a girl who would turn fear into faith, and witchcraft into light. For as long as the oak stood, the world would remember the name whispered by the wind, Mary Willard, the Witch of the Leyline.